But you see, the best Christmas present I got ever, I was given when I was 3.5 years old. It was a large wooden tipper truck with a bright red cab. It had bright yellow loading area that could tip up, and it had real rubber tires on metal rims. It was fantastic. And my Christmas celebrations as a child were all wonderful, because my father was born on a farm. That was the farm that was bought by Troll Money that I told you about on last long story short. But that's another story. And he was one of 11 children. And when they grew up, they brought their families back to the farmhouse, to the family home, to celebrate Christmas. So I had 18 cousins, and that was fantastic. And we ended up on Christmas Eve at the farmhouse in the early afternoon, because in Sweden you celebrate Christmas on Christmas Eve. And there in the parlour stood the Christmas tree. It had been brought in from the forest. It had been decorated the day before with glitter, with live candles, and with shining glass balls of all the colours of the rainbow. It was beautiful. It was green. It was glowing. But the first thing we did was to eat the Christmas smörgåsbord. It was a table laden with all sorts of goodies. There was the ham, there was the bite-sized sausages, there were the meatballs, just the ones you get in IKEA, but much better. And there was the pickled herrings, and there was the salads, the beetroot salad, the potato salad, the breads, the cheeses, and the fizzy drinks. And we children could eat as much as we wanted, and we did. And then after a while, when the food had settled down, the Christmas tree was brought out from the corner in the parlour to the middle of the room, and we all joined hands around it, and we danced around the Christmas tree. And we sang all those songs about the fox that was running across the ice, and about the farmer who was cutting his oats, and when he had done that, he was looking around to find his sweetheart, and in the end, he found her. And then there was the song about the Christmas Naomi, so it's how they celebrated Christmas. And so we took hands, and there was Räven raskar över isen, och får vi lov och sjunga pojkarnas visa. But that parlour room got too crowded of all us people. We were 30 old people. So we had to dance out into the other rooms of the house, and around the whole house, and then out into that crystal clear, snow-clad yard. And across that yard, across the street, and into the neighbour, and around his house, and back over the yard again into our own house. And then after that, the most exciting scene on Christmas Eve was about to happen. Father Christmas. Because you see, in Sweden, Father Christmas doesn't sneak down the chimney and leaves the presents under the tree and then disappears out again without nobody sees him. No, he comes in person. And for some reason, we all know when he's about to come, and we sit there in that parlour with anticipation. And he will look in through the window at us with his red face and his white beard and his red hat. And then we sit there and wait a little bit longer for that dunk, dunk, dunk. And then he comes in and he stamps the snow off his boots. He's got a big sack over his shoulder, and he steps into the room and he looks around and he says, "Are there any good children in here?" Because of course the children knew that we had to be good to get Christmas presents. Yes, we're all good. And then he sits down on the chair and he opens the sack and he takes out one present after the other and he reads the messages. And I remember when I could walk up to Father Christmas and I looked up into those kind eyes and that red face and that white beard, and he handed me that big parcel with that big tipper truck. But it was too crowded in that parlour room to play with it. And anyway, we were about to eat again, because you eat at Christmas, don't you? So now it was time for the Christmas pudding. And in Sweden, that is rice pudding. And it's sprinkled with cinnamon sugar. And often there is a blob of butter on top of it. And you also hide an almond in it. And the one who gets that almond is the one that will get married during the next year. And after that, the Christmas celebration was over. It was late in the evening. And we got into the car and drove home again. I was sitting on the back seat holding that tipper track in my hands. And I looked out into the headlights of the car and I saw that crystal white road with big snow walls on either side and the pine trees covered in snow. And then we got home and I said, "Mom, can I play with my tipper track?" "No, Ulf, it's too late. You have to wait till tomorrow. Put it here in the hallway." So I did. In Sweden, you don't celebrate the Christmas service at midnight. You celebrate it very early on Christmas Day morning. So at 5 o'clock, my father and my older brother and my older sister got in the car and drove off 8 kilometers to the church. I was too little to go there, so I had to stay behind with my mum. And we were sitting there in her bed after everybody had left. And it was so warm and cozy and it was all dark around us, 5:30 in the morning. And we were sitting there sipping our sweet, hot chocolate. And soon I was going to play with my tipper track. I can smell smoke. She jumped out of bed and she ran out into the hallway. I followed her. And we looked under the door down to the basement. Smoke came up from underneath. She opened the door and the whole stairwell was in a big flame. She quickly shut the door. She ran into the sitting room to grab the phone to phone the fire brigade, but the phone was already down. "Quick, we have to get out and go to the neighbor. Come!" And I had my teddy bear under my arm. And she had grabbed some clothes and she took me by the hand and we walked out into the hallway and there stood the tipper track. "Mom, I have to bring the tipper track." "No, you can't. We haven't got time. Come, quickly." So we rushed out into the yard and she picked me up and carried me across the snow and out into the street. And it was when we came under that street light outside that I began to cry. And I don't know if I cried because the house was on fire or because I had to leave the tipper track. I think it was because I had to leave the tipper track behind. But then we got into the neighbor and my mother called the fire brigade and a message was sent to the church. And the church warden went down into the church. He tapped my father on his shoulder. He told him, "Your house is on fire." And the church service was abruptly interrupted and stopped. Because you see, we lived in a small village and the fire brigade was made up of voluntary firemen. And they were all in the church that morning. So everybody rushed out of the church to get back to the village and fight the fire. And my brother had told me that when he got out of the church on that pitch dark Christmas Day morning, he could see how above the forest the sky was aflame from the flames of our house. And he didn't know at that time if my mother and I were still in it. But later on in the morning, I was sitting there in the neighbor's kitchen, looking out of the kitchen window at the house, and now it was all exciting because flames shot up through the roof, and flames stood out of the windows like torches. And there was the fire engine, and there were people running around with hose pipes spraying water. "Mom, can I go out and have a look?" "No, Ulf, it's too dangerous. You have to stay in here. You would only be in the way." So there I sat in the kitchen of my neighbor and I saw how our house burned down. And when the fire was eventually extinguished, it was a gutted out shed. But that night we could stay in my auntie's house. And I remember waking up the next morning on the floor in her sitting room on mattresses. And there was my father and my mother and my brother and my sister. And it was so cozy. And I thought, maybe we can stay here now. But we couldn't. We had to move into a temporary house while our house was built up again. And when my father came home from work, he used to go and help the builders. And I used to come with him and help also. I had to be a bit careful about the master builder because he was a grumpy old whatsit and he didn't like children. And he told me to get out of the way. But the bricklayer, he was a friendly, burly man, and he talked to me and he cracked jokes with me. And sometimes he even let me play bricks in place. And one day the house was built again and we could move back. It was a state-of-the-art for 1957. We had a bathroom with a toilet, a wash and basin, and a bathtub. And on the first floor there was even a separate toilet. And down in the basement there was a separate shower room. Nobody in that little village had ever seen such a magnificent modern house. But I still missed my tipper truck. And I hoped that I would get another one next Christmas. But I didn't. And you know, I still miss that tipper truck. And I so much regret that I couldn't be allowed to play with it at least once.